Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to switch things up. For the last month and a half, however long the playoffs have been going on, I've been almost solely talking about the NBA playoffs, which makes sense. But, of course, now that there are only 3 teams left, the Nuggets, the Celtics, and the Heat, as I'm recording this video, 27 teams have started their NBA off seasons, and so in this video, I want to talk about some of the most interesting storylines heading into the off season for me, and there are 2 teams in particular that I really want to get into, the Portland Trailblazers and the Houston Rockets, who have some crazy decisions to make and some huge potential blockbuster moves that they could go ahead and pursue in this offseason. I've got some pretty strong opinions about what both of those squads should do, and they were kind of the ones that inspired me to make this video. But towards the end, I'll probably also talk about a couple of other teams, and mainly, I want to talk for a little bit about some of the coaching searches going on at the moment, because there are a lot of really big names out there, and a lot of great teams that need head coaches at this point. So, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos, and let's go ahead and get right into it. I think I want to go ahead and start off by talking about the Blazers, because I have a bit more to say about them than I do about Houston and some of the other topics. So we'll begin here, because the Blazers are in a weird spot right now. Obviously, for the past few years, they've been trying to compete for an NBA title centered around maybe the greatest player in their franchise history in Damian Lillard, and it's been a consistent theme here on the channel and across NBA circles. Basically, every single summer, people debate, should the Blazers trade Dame now? Should they wait? Should they keep trying to compete and try and get him a ring? Should Dame request a trade? It's a constant saga, and this year, more than ever, the debate is raging, because this past year, Dame had one of, if not maybe his best seasons ever individually. He was unbelievable offensively. He averaged like 30 points a night. He was doing it on unreal efficiency, some of the best of his career. He had 71 points at one point in the season. He was ridiculous. Like, I can't say enough positive things about the way that Dame played this season. He probably would have been an MVP candidate if the Blazers were at all a good team, but that's the problem. They weren't. They were pretty bad. They began the year looking like, hey, maybe this Blazers team is going to be a playoff squad, and then they slowly fell down the standings. There were some injuries and some other things that went on for them that kind of derailed them, but all in all, I just don't think the roster was very good. Dame was amazing, but the supporting cast just didn't have enough in the tank, especially. They had no depth whatsoever. Like, once the starters got out of the game, it was a complete disaster. The defense was kind of a mess offensively. It was hit or miss. Just not a great team this season for the Portland Trailblazers, and so coming to this offseason, again, it's a debate of should they trade Dame, and I think now more than ever, it's the perfect time to go ahead and move on from Damian Lillard. His value is at the highest it's probably going to be going forward, because every year that you wait, he's getting older. He just came off one of the best seasons of his career, and also, you're set up very well right now more than ever to start this rebuild, because at the end of the season, the Blazers made a very smart decision when they realized that, hey, even if we make the play-in or the playoffs, we're not going to make any noise, and they decided to shut down Damian Lillard and tank to end the season, which was perfect, because it landed them the 3rd overall pick in this year's draft, a really, really talented draft class. Of course, they're not going to get Victor Wembanyama, but they're at 3. They could potentially get Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, even Amin Thompson if they want to go that route. Those 3 guys are amazing players. Now, I've said on this channel before, for me, Scoot Henderson is by far and away my 2nd best prospect behind Vic, but that's a conversation we can have in another video. Maybe I'll do a mock draft, and I can ramble a little bit more about why I think Scoot is going to be so good, but there's even, like, rumors that the Hornets are looking at Brandon Miller there at 2, so Scoot could fall to you at the 3 spot, which would be amazing for your franchise. So you trade Damian Lillard away, and you're going to get back a haul for him. Like, you're going to get first-round picks on first-round picks. Think about, like, the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert hauls. You're going to get something similar to that, and probably also a great young player to put alongside whoever you get there at 3. And if it's Scoot, you start your rebuild with Scoot, whatever assets you get for Dame, and not to mention Shaedon Sharpe, who just had a really solid rookie season after many people thought he was going to be a bit more raw than he was. He looks like he's got some polish already, and he had a great run to end the season, as well as Anthony Simons, who continues to establish himself as one of the most fun young offensive guards in the entire league. So you have Simons, Sharpe, whoever you get at number 3, maybe it's Scoot, and if he turns out to be as good as I think he's going to be, he could be a top 10 player in this league. Whoever you get for Dame, but whether it's draft picks or great young players, your rebuild is off to a fantastic start, one of the best starts you could ask for a new era. And there are a lot of Blazers fans that agree with me. Now, there's probably even more that think that I'm, trying to force Damian Lillard out of Portland. I don't want to see him there. If I'm being honest, I would love to see Dame win a ring in Portland. I think it'd be one of the best stories in NBA history, but I just don't see it as being something feasible at this point. I really don't think there's any route to this Blazers team becoming a championship contender and winning a ring at this point in Dame's career. Now is the perfect moment with the 3rd overall pick, all the young assets on your roster. You've also got Cam Reddish you could bring back. I believe he's a restricted free agent. Matisse Thybulle as well. You've got, 3rd overall pick, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons. It's a great young core potentially. You just trade Dame, bring in more assets to that. It's the perfect time to go ahead and move on from Damian Lillard. I've said in the past that I think for like the past 2 or 3 summers, I've said I would trade Dame, but now more than ever, I mean it. This is the chance. However, Portland, of course, because it's the most Portland thing possible, they're looking to trade the pick. They want to trade it for a star to put next to Dame and try and upgrade this roster to compete for a title. And if I'm being honest, there's not a single star that's going to be on the market that I think will make Portland a championship contender. And you're going to give up the 3rd overall pick, which could potentially be Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson, both guys that could be the face of your franchise for years to come if you decide to go for a rebuild, for maybe like a 5, a 6 seed if you get really lucky and get a great player for that 3rd overall pick. Like, that's what you're giving up the 3rd overall pick for. Because the only guys that I could see on the market are like Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. Maybe you trade like a Simons and a Sharp or one of those 2 guys and pick 3 for those 2 guys. Those guys would make your team a lot better. You bring back Jeremy Grant. You've got a solid team. But that's not a championship contender. That team's nowhere near the level of the Denver Nuggets, who look unstoppable so far throughout these playoffs. You're nowhere near as good as that squad. I know a lot of Blazers fans and people as a whole have been like, oh, what if Joel Embiid becomes available? He's not. The Sixers aren't going to trade Joel Embiid. He's not going to be available. Jaylen Brown is another guy who could potentially be available, but Boston isn't going to want pick 3 and Simons for Jaylen Brown. They want to compete now in the moment. Maybe you could make a 3-team deal where the Blazers get Jaylen Brown, Boston gets another star, and some 3rd team gives up that star for pick 3 and Anthony Simons, maybe something like that. But even then, Jaylen Brown, again, does not make the Blazers championship contenders. No move that they make with this 3rd overall pick is going to make them a championship contender. Plus, you have to think about the fact that Jeremy Grant is a free agent. You're going to have to throw him a bunch of money, most likely, so that's going to cap you out even further than you already are. Yusuf Nurkic just isn't a great starting center at this point. I think he'd be fine off the bench, but starting center, I just don't think that's a path for him anymore on a championship contender. Your bench is still really, really bad, so you've got to make improvements there. I just don't see a path to this Portland team competing. Start the rebuild now. I understand you want to keep Dame. He's arguably the best player in your franchise history, and you want to get him a ring. He's been loyal. He wants to be there. But I really think at this point, it's for the best interest of both sides if they just split this thing up. It's the same thing I've been saying over and over again. But now more than ever, it just blows my mind that they're going to trade the opportunity to get a franchise cornerstone for the future of this new era in exchange for a star who might be here for a few seasons that could be competitive alongside Dame, but ultimately is not going to lead you anywhere near to a championship. You could get a young, maybe even championship level core down the line right now in this offseason, but they're not going to do it. I don't see the vision. Maybe you could let me know in the comments below what you think. I just think the idea of trading pick 3 to try and build around Dame at this point is very, very short-sighted and kind of encapsulates everything about this recent Portland era where they just keep trying this thing over and over and over again. And I know they want to get him a ring. I just don't think it's possible at this point, especially when he's making like $60 million. You're going to be capped out for his entire contract. There's no way you can make cap space. I just don't see the vision with what they're trying to do. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe they end up making a deal with that. They trade some of their other young pieces and suddenly they're really good. But even then, I don't see any path to them competing for a title with Dame at this point. Start your rebuild now, please. Next, let's go ahead and talk about the Houston Rockets, who have been in a lot of conversations over this offseason because of James Harden. Now, heading into the year, it felt kind of like a foregone conclusion that Harden, at the end of this contract that he signed with Philly last offseason, he would just re-sign with the Sixers. They would remain competitive. It's his best opportunity at this point in his career, in my opinion, to win that elusive title that he's been chasing the entire time. He's got MVP next to him in Joel Embiid. They can bring in a new head coach that he likes better than Doc Rivers because apparently there's some kind of disconnect there between him and Doc. It's a good spot for James Harden to continue playing high-level competitive basketball. He wasn't an all-star this past year, but he was still really, really good. However, about halfway through the season, a rumor popped up that maybe Harden would prefer a reunion with the Houston Rockets, which right off the bat feels weird. I mean, just from a basketball standpoint, because if we're talking about the personal aspect of it, Harden spent so many years of his career over there in Houston, it kind of feels like home for him. I believe he's even said that he goes back there all the time in the offseason. It makes sense why Harden, just from a personal standpoint, would want to go home to Houston. The Rockets would want to bring back one of their franchise legends. Just from a, personal narrative type standpoint, it makes sense why these two sides would look for a reunion. But I've been one of the many people saying that from a basketball standpoint, I don't think it makes much sense. We can start from Harden's perspective, because say if he wants to win a championship, going to Houston, in my opinion, is kind of just saying like, I'm not going to do it. Now, maybe the Rockets have sudden crazy growth from a lot of their young players. They trade off some of those guys to get better, and somehow they end up pulling off a title. But I really don't think it's going to come anytime soon. I feel like the Rockets are still decently far away. Now, again, they've got an interesting young core over there, and I do think after a few more years, you build up more young talent, maybe they could end up being a championship-level squad, but they're not really there at the moment. And if Harden goes there, to me, it's kind of him just saying, I want to be myself. I think there was some term used in some of the rumors that came out that he wants to just freely play basketball and be himself. And maybe that would be, Harden's ideal situation. He doesn't need to go win a ring. He just kind of wants to ball out, be home in Houston, have fun, be a mentor to the young guys. And I do think the idea of him mentoring some of the young players on that roster is a good idea. The problem is, if they're going for James Harden, they're going to offer him probably a ton of money. There was rumors that some teams are willing to offer him $200 million. And if you give James Harden at this point in his career $200 million, it's a massive mistake unless you are a championship contender right now. Like Philly, I still don't think should really offer him that much money, but I understand it a lot more if Philly does it as opposed to Houston. If you're committing $200 million to a guy who is showing signs of regression, sure, he's still really good, but he's actively showing signs of regression, and you're nowhere near a championship level squad. What makes you think you're going to be able to get there before he ends up completely declining? I just think that's a complete disaster. You tie up all of your cap space. He makes you better now when it feels like they still need a few more years of learning, growing as a young team, probably being in the lottery to get more young talent before they're truly ready to make win now moves. It just feels rushed. It feels like a mistake. And there are more rumors that if they bring in James Harden, they'll want to make moves to be competitive. So maybe even trading that 4th overall pick is on the table, which is another thing that I think would be an absolute disaster. There are some great young players in this draft class. Don't trade this pick. This is a chance to get a great young player to put alongside Jalen Green, Jabari Smith-Jr., Alperen Sengun, all the guys on that roster. Don't give it up to try and win now when you've been one of the worst teams in the league the past few seasons. Sure, James Harden is going to make you better, and I think having a playmaker would be huge for Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr. I've been saying for a while that I don't think Kevin Porter Jr. is the answer there at the point guard spot, but I don't think James Harden at 34 years old at this point is the answer either, because he's going to have 3-4 more seasons. He's going to decline over the course of those. Sure, he's a mentor and he's going to set you up decently now, but even with a roster of James Harden, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun, Kenyon Martin Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., whoever they get for pick 4, I don't even think that's a playoff team still at this point, because the West is tough. There are a lot of great squads out there, a lot of really young and up-and-coming teams. I just don't see the Rockets being a high-level competitive squad in that Western Conference, and I don't even know if they make the playoffs with that team. It just feels so rushed. Again, I understand from a personal standpoint why Harden and Houston would want to reunite, but from a basketball standpoint, keep doing this rebuild thing. You can bring in veterans. I just don't think it should be a James Harden contract that could be like $150 to $200 million. He'll also take some touches away from your young talent. If you're going to go for a point guard, I'd rather they just draft one like an Amin Thompson, let him run the one, facilitate, be that tall guard, and see what he and Jalen Green can do. I'd rather they do that than bring in James Harden. It just feels like it doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, those were kind of my mini rants about those two team situations. A couple more things I want to touch on, mainly the head coaching search going on in the NBA right now. Every team wants Nick Nurse. It feels like he kind of just has his pick, whether he wants to go to Phoenix, Milwaukee, Philly. Those kind of feel like the top 3 spots for him at this point. So I think he ends up going to one of those positions, and wherever he goes, I think Nick Nurse could be incredibly successful. I still think he's a good coach. It was just kind of time for both sides to split off over there in Toronto. Phoenix is apparently looking at 1 billion people. Some examples include, some of their assistants. Frank Vogel is a name that came up. Doc Rivers is apparently a candidate for the Phoenix job, which is very surprising. I did not think he was going to get this type of interest from a hopeful championship contending squad right away after the way that the Sixers season ended. Apparently Mike Budenholzer is in consideration for a couple of these jobs, which isn't surprising, even though, again, he's not one of my top candidates for some of these teams. Yeah, I don't know. I think Nick Nurse is pretty clearly the top guy in the market. Monty Williams, I think, is also still a good coach. I don't know. It just felt like in Phoenix. Again, kind of similar to the Nick Nurse situation. It wasn't working out there. I still think Monty Williams can be really successful in a new situation. Mike D'Antoni, I think, is also a really fun option for the Sixers. He's a guy that's also been rumored to be in consideration over there. Maybe if Nick Nurse decides that he wants to go to Milwaukee or Phoenix, they end up bringing in Mike D'Antoni. I would love to see what he could do with Tyrese Maxey in particular. I think he'd be a player that would excel in a Mike D'Antoni system. But yeah, coaching searches are going on right now. There's a lot of things going on over there. Kenny Atkinson is another name that continuously pops up in these conversations. The Detroit Pistons are rumored to be looking at Kevin Ollie, former UConn coach. I believe he coached in the G League this past season too, so we'll see what happens over there. You've also got the Raptors, who are having one of the weirdest coaching searches out of anybody right now. They've mentioned a couple of names, and some of them are wild. There's a rumor that they contacted JJ Redick about coaching, which is strange. He's a media personality. I mean, maybe he could be a good coach, but he hasn't gotten any experience in the NBA, so that feels a bit strange to me. Also, apparently they reached out to Steve Nash, which makes sense, a Canadian legend, but I didn't love what he did in Brooklyn. I don't think he's the right fit there. So I'm sure we're going to get some very confusing hires in this offseason. Hopefully we get a lot more good ones. But yeah, the coaching situation is just really interesting to me at this point. Also, real quick, I wanted to touch on the fact that the Hornets are reportedly considering Brandon Miller over Scoot at 2, which is something I alluded to a bit earlier. Again, I think Scoot could fit next to LaMelo in the backcourt. I think they would be a really fun pairing. If it doesn't end up working out, it doesn't end up working out, but I think that he is by far the second best player in this class over Brandon Miller. So if I'm the Hornets, I'm just going to go ahead and take him. And yeah, I think that's kind of all the things I wanted to touch on in this video. I think those are all the storylines. If there's any other offseason narratives that you want to hear me talk about, let me know in the comment section below, and maybe I'll make more videos like this where I kind of just break down some random things. But for right now, I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. I'll see y'all later. Everyone, say it back.